Hey guys, welcome back. So guys, in this video we are going to do about how to edit and update the data. Okay, so guys, now let's get started with this edit option. So what we want to do is that we want to, when we click on this edit button, that time a model should come something like this, and the same input tags will be there, and then all the data should be fetched. So these data should be fetched inside this form. Okay, so let's get started with it. Let's go to our VS Code editor, and over here this is our table and the script for code. So let's move on, and let me just minimize for this view button. So we coded in previous video about view button, and now we are going to start with this edit button. So same way you are going to get started with it, as simple. So let's check with jQuery on event function, and over here you are going to tell on document select. So when the page loads, I want to check on the click, and then on what click event, which we want that on a button. So what button is nothing but your edit button. So this edit button is nothing but your this edit button. Okay, so this button is your edit button, where you have assigned a edit button class name. So let's call that. So inside the dot you have to paste that. Okay, done. And now over here you have to select with that. So what you're going to select, when we click on this, I need this first ID. So let's get that ID number 1. So how will you get that? For that you have the class student ID inside that. From with that help of student ID we are going to fetch. As simple, let's type that. First I'm going to create a variable called student ID is equal to, where you are going to tell this $this. So when it's clicked, I'm going to get the closest value of that. So closest value is nothing but closest attribute is table row, and I'm going to find inside that. So what I'm going to find, the student ID is stud ID, which is the class. So you need to assign with the dot, and then get the whatever text inside that. So text function, and now you will get this student ID. So guys, now let's write the Ajax code to call that. As simple, JQ Ajax, and make this type to method, and method we are going to send is post post, and let's remove this data type we don't require, and over here inside this data you need to send this student ID. So let me just create that input of your student ID, and this you are going to take and paste over here. That's it, done. And the URL will be your route. So Ajax edit. Okay, not like this, Ajax student / edit we will tell. Okay, let's save, and now let's create a route with this. So first step, so after creating all the code works, then we are getting into response. So let's create a route. Let me just copy, go to routes.php, and let's create one route. Simple $ROUTS routes, where I'm going to use post method. Okay, because we have passed the post method into that. And let's move to our controller called Ajax student controller, which we have already created that. So let's copy and paste the same controller name, and over here we'll create one edit method. Done. Okay, why is this error showing? Oops, I have given a dot. Make it sure you are giving comma. So let's go to our Ajax controller and create a edit function over there. Ajax controller, let's create public function where I'm going to use this edit. Oops. And inside this we have to type the code. So as simple, you are getting the data, right? So we have already used the same code to get that. So let me just paste that same code. So as simple, created a variable, and inside this we are calling our Ajax model, where you have to call this model. So to call this model, you have to call at the use with the use thing, where you can call this Ajax student. So this Ajax is already over here. So this is my table. So let's get back to our function called edit over there, and getting your student ID. So this student ID you are getting from your Ajax code. So over here you have pasted this. So let's copy this and paste over here. Paste that, and then you are storing into variable student ID, and then you are passing that ID into your object called students. So this student object, where you are finding the data of your from your Ajax student using find function, and then storing into variable of array, that is students. Done. So after everything works, then you are sending this data into a responsive JSON format. So let's pass this $data variable inside this, and after the success of this, you are going back to your index.php file over here. So let's copy and console.log function and see the output of it. So let's get back to our Google Chrome, refresh the page. You'll be able to find the output. So let me just open console. So let's click on inspect and go to your console page over here. So just ignore these 3 lines because this is a bootstrap thing. So just ignore that, and let's click on this edit button on ID number 1. Let's click edit. You can see the data has come over here. Perfect. So ID, all the data is coming. Let me click on 4. You can check with that ID 4, it's coming. Cool. So guys, now let's fetch this data into our model, so which will be using the same model we will use it. So let's close and let's move out, and over here let me just comment, and first let us fetch all the data. So how will you fetch that? Using for each loop. So in jQuery you have to use jQuery over here, and then let's take this and set the response over here and make this as key, where your student value. Done. And then you have to assign it into one value. So let's give a text or value can give. We need in an input box, so we just mention with the val, where you're going to mention that in your name. First we'll take with that ID and give this into hashtag, where I'm going to tell student underscore ID. Then same for this second one also. So let me just complete with this 4 steps, 4 input step. Done. Now guys, let's call that model also. So what model you are going to call? Oops, let's give escape. And now inside this you want to show the model. So whenever you click that modal model, which will be show, and the model ID which you are going to tell is hash student edit model. Okay, so we are going to create with this ID a model. So let's get back to our top, where you can check with that add student model, right? So let us copy this. Oops, let me just copy and paste over here. Let's mention it as edit student model, and now you have to copy your ID. So what ID we have given that code? Okay, so this is the ID which we are going to assign with the model. This is our edit student model over here. Let's paste that, and now over here edit student data, and the data you have to pass inside this. So what will you pass over here? You need to pass that ID. ID is equal to, where you are going to tell that all your IDs which we have given over here. So student ID. So first you have to create one input for student ID. Let's create that input, which I am going to give as hidden. We do not need to show that. Let's give ID. We are going to tell this student ID. So same way you have to assign this ID for student underscore name with this. Okay, student underscore name, email also for the email. So let's complete this for our inputs. So guys, now I have pasted for this each input tags email, phone and error course. Okay, so I just removed that the validation part from here to show that message. And now let's continue guys to update the data. So let's go back to our model over here. Let's save. Everything is working fine. And now let's check this. So let's come over here, refresh the page, and then let's click on it. Let me click on edit. You can see the model edit student data, where you can see ved@gmail.com, phone number BCA. Cool. Everything is working. Let's check with the ID number 4. You can see Anwar data has come. So guys, now let us change this button name to update, and when we click on this, the data should get saved. So let's begin with that. So first step, we will change the button name first. So let's make it to update, and over here let me change this button name to update. Okay, student Ajax student, which is update, right? So let's take this name and start the code about it. So let's get back below in your script tag, and let's let's make it small and start the code. As simple. Let's check with JQ on event, where you're going to select document, and event will be click event on which will be Ajax student update. So on this click, the function should work. So now once it works, everything is fine over here. So let's call that create a variable called var data is equal to, inside the curly braces, I want to fetch all the input fields. So how can you fetch that? So first let us tell name, not name, we'll give ID and then name. So first get that. So what you're going to get, the ID over here. So we are in the student edit model over here, and this is the student ID. So let's copy this, which is in the ID, copy, and get back to your script over here. Let's paste that hashtag, where I'm going to get that value from that. Okay, done. And now same way you're going to paste for everyone. Change this variable things. So let me just change and add all things. So over here we are sending this name, and from here you are going to call that name attribute of your model. So name ID. So this name will be copied, and then student email. So let's get back to code over here. Let's update that. So let me just finish with it. So I have added now. Once it's done guys, now we have to create the Ajax query to update the data. So let's tell JQ Ajax and change this type to method, where we are going to tell this as post method, and from this we have to create a URL. But before creating URL, let's remove this some data we don't need over here, and this thing we are going to remove and call this variable called data over here. And let's create a URL, Ajax student, where / you're going to update. Done. And then you're going to send it. Let's copy this name, URL, and create a route. We are using post method, so let's create route called post, and inside this pass this, and let's go to our same controller called Ajax student controller, paste, and let's create a function called update into our student Ajax controller. Let's move over there and create the function. Now type public function, let's create a variable called student. Student is equal to where your key of your model, that is Ajax student. This is my model, where you have assigned at top, where you have called that over here inside my model. And now first let's create the variable with the name student underscore ID is equal to where you are getting that $this, which will be a request by get the post method, okay, and that ID will be from your Ajax over here. As you can see that ID, you can mention this directly ID, or let's give us student underscore ID. Okay, so let's copy the student underscore ID and call it over here as simple. And then let's create a variable one more data and assign that array over there, and inside this you have to call that. So let's call the name, where inside this you are going to call this same post method, and let's remove the semicolon and add comma over here because we are inside the array, and let's call that input name. So same way you have to call this for all these inputs. So let me just finish with that. So guys, I have done this, and now these fields are nothing but your database column fields, so which means that this column names of your database. So let's get back over here, and now let's call this object student and send the update function into this, and first will be pass the ID. So we are going to pass that student ID, give comma and space, then pass your variable called data. Let's copy and paste over here. So your data will get updated. So after getting updated, you need to send the response over here. Let's copy this and paste over here, and what you are going to send in this. So let me just send with that one message over here. So let's tell $message, okay, is equal to where you're sending with the array, and inside this you are going to tell that status, and then give comma and again mention, not comma, give this is equal to forward arrow, where you are going to tell updated successfully. Okay, done. Let's save this and pass this message called message over here inside this. So let's get back to our index page, and after that response you are getting, so let's call that over here. So how will you call that? We are setting the message, so we have already used one alertify to show the message. So let me just paste that, paste over here, and once the response has come over here, that status will be called. Okay, so this, make sure your spelling is correct over here, which you are sending that status. So this status should be sent correctly. So after updating, you need to close some models, right? So which I mean to say, this model, when you click on update, let me just refresh once again. Okay, something is missing, I think. So let me just inspect that. What is that? It's not showing. Console, see on this, something is missing, which is, let me just click on it. So you can move to source. Okay, so here is the error. Let's get back and give comma over here. Okay, save this and let's refresh. Let's go to console. Cool, so data is working fine. And now let's continue our code. So you can see that, right? So when I click to update, the data should get update, and then this model should be closed automatically and input should get empty. Okay, so let's get started with that. So first we will move. So now let's move over here, and let me just paste that code. So these three codes I have pasted over here, and the first code is as simple. You can see that what the models you are going to load, that you have to change with that, right? So let's call that model ID. You can see that edit student, which is student edit model. Let's take that and paste into your update success code. Okay, and this model will be hide. So automatically when it's successful, it will hide, and then your student table data, this table data where your records is fetched, that time it will make it to empty, and then again call this load function. So this load function is nothing but your query of getting the data and looping that, as simple. So let's see and execute that. Let's refresh. So I'm going to click on this second ID where edit, and now we will change this course to MCA. Let's update, and you can see that updated successfully message also came, and your data also is loaded where you can see MCA without the page refresh. Cool. So now let's again update with this last ID where I want to make this course as BCom, and let me click. So there is no page refresh load or reload. Okay, let's click on update. You can see everything successfully updated. So guys, this is how we do this jQuery Ajax CRUD application in Codeigniter 4, and let's continue next video about how to delete the data without refreshing this page. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe, like and share.